Heya! So, blitzing past the recap, there's just a few things to say. Go watch the first part if you haven't. But, in this challenge, I can only deal damage via the horse. Except for one skill I have that can literally only ever do 1 damage. I only have that skill so that I can skip my non-horse turns, so I hardly ever use it later down the line. And finally, I was a chef back in Greenhorn, but we beat that part of the game, and have finally arrived in Next Door. Now that my job reset, I got to be one of the best jobs that we could ever get our hands on, the Scientist. The reason that Scientist is so great is because it has the skill Cure.exe. Not only does this replenish HP at a non-static amount, but it also replenishes MP. This meant that I would gain access to a virtually infinite amount of turn skips, but more importantly, I could continuously heal, and would reliably be able to use Horse Whispering. The downside, though, is that the skill comes very late, at level 14. That was a high level, but it was worth it, and I needed this in the future. It only replenishes MP slowly, but even that doesn't matter too much because I have to wait for Lawnmower to let me attack anyways. And speaking of Horse Whispering, the Scientist has a great one. It's not AoE damage or anything, but we have Snort to cover that anyways. This does a targeted attack for huge damage, and it's adjacent targets too. To top it all off, Scientist also has Safety Mask, which covers one of my main weaknesses in this challenge, being status effects. Of course it doesn't cover all status effects, but it covers a majority of the really bad ones. So going off into the wilds of Next Door, I fought what were pretty easy enemies for a good while, got a cute outfit, and went to stop the genie. Honestly, this did take a good while, but wasn't bad at all. After stopping him, all the faces in Next Door got done tooked, so I had to rescue them all. The bosses at this point were actually quite tough, but more than that, there was one boss that was actually just hard to get to. You see, there exist types of enemies who you could say have insta-kill attacks, which poses a big issue. To put into perspective why it's such an issue, let's just say this. In Jobless, I had the ability to punch things. That is it, but it was on command at the very least. In this challenge, I have to wait for Lawnmower to ever so graciously let me attack things. So in that time I'm waiting, the enemies can use their insta-kills. So yeah, scary scorpions are in fact very scary in this challenge. Then there's the snake boss, which was actually just tough. It summoned enemies that could actually deal significant damage to me, and had a lot of health, though it was hard to defeat. But, with enough persistence, I was able to laser it to death. Once I went into the pyramid, I had to deal with a new, quote-unquote, status effect, being Stolen Weapon. When a mummy ate my weapon, I simply couldn't use skills anymore, and my attacks with the horse were much weaker. So I just had to eat snacks and kill the mummy when Lawnmower let me, or run away and try again. The most annoying thing was that they always did it with 100% success, and were quite fast. Again, persistence was all that I needed, and I got past them. The bosses weren't too bad inside of here, except for, of course, the Pharaoh. What makes this so bad is that the Pharaoh status is also a 100% chance. Not to mention that it took away 3 of my turns, the boss got 7 attacks on me in that time, and I couldn't do a single thing during those turns. Honestly though, my defense was better than I thought it would be. Right now I was only level 12, 2 levels away from Cure.exe, and I have done so well without it up until this point. I knew that if I just got my hands on some more stats, friendship levels, and that skill, I could do this. After spending a long time grinding, I got to where I needed to be. With my new stats, I only took 5 damage per hit from the Pharaoh, and multiplying that by 7 meant that I took 35 every time that I went under the status. I healed around 28 health, aka most of the damage that it dealt. With 180 HP sprinkles in my pocket, this boss was going to go down sooner or later, I thought. However, I did lose on that attempt, but I got right back up. I bought some new gear at the inn, which was an even cuter outfit, but more importantly, I now only took 4 damage, totaling to 28 per status. This meant that I was now even with the Pharaoh's damage output. Sometimes I healed a bit less, sometimes a bit more, and there's also the fact that when I was able to attack, that's a turn that I didn't heal. But the sprinkles made up for that little detail. After a good few giant laser blasts, I got it down to low health. Once the opportunity presented itself, I used mounted attack, and finally got rid of that insufferable boss. Now, I finally got to move on to the realm of the Fae. Except the mod kinda did an oopsie. Look, let me just say, I didn't make a save backup, and I could not mod in a fix. So, my job didn't actually reset. Trust me though, I knew that I could beat this world anyways, even if my job had reset. My original plan was to use Princess or Popstar to make the enemies dance until I could attack, but things clearly didn't go according to plan. There's also the fact that I couldn't stop the NPCs from attacking enemies and dealing quite a bit of damage, so let's just please gloss over this world real quick and focus on the rest of the challenge. I just beat the bosses. The only part that was a bit worrisome was the spider boss, since it, put spiders on me. The rest were much more manageable, and the worst regular enemy was, of course, the Twerkies. I only gained 1 level from this whole area, because, I was kinda overleveled if you couldn't already tell. You're usually around level 10 or under by the end of the first 3 worlds, and I'm now level 15, and was 14 at the end of next door. I'm just saying this to show you that I'm not getting any big bonus from my little job mishap. Now that I'm in Karkadon, I had to rescue my non-existent teammates. Since I never had any teammates, default Miis took their place, but would not join my party or anything. This means that returning their faces didn't really work. So just like in Jobless, I fought all the bosses anyways, and changed the stage connections so that the Gourmet would open up the path. The Cerberus boss was next, and provided no trouble. I could heal more than it could hurt me, and Sophie was also there too. He didn't help too much with any of these bosses, luckily, otherwise the challenge would feel way too easy. The game was being silly, and didn't give me hyper sprinkles until the next boss, but that was fine since I couldn't use them. As you might know, being hyper would make it so that my Mii can't use the horse, which is very much against the rules of the horse-only challenge. Anyways, said boss was pretty tough. That may have partially been due to the fact that I, targeted the wrong enemy with my horse whispering on the first attempt, but Anyways, I beamed down the boss, and we were ready to go. The next boss was pretty weak, and I dealt with that one in mere moments. While making my way to the Dark Lord, I picked up a new cute outfit, and encountered the biggest obstacle in the whole castle. The Fiend. If you don't already know, Fiends are able to one-shot people, they move insanely fast, and are very magic resistant. There were also 2 enemies which could hardly hurt me, but, as I said before, insta-kills are the bane of this challenge. Since I unlocked job changing, I thought about using Popstar to use Earworm, and make it dance on the off chance that the Fiend didn't kill me first. The problem with that, though, was that I was stuck in the castle. Yeah, there's a Falling Rocks event that's supposed to happen, but I don't have a party to split, so I had to fix that. But in doing so, I made it so that I couldn't walk back to the lower level areas. The only thing that I could do now was fight the fiend over and over again until I got lucky enough. And let me tell you, this was certainly a live lawnmower reaction, because he was just watching me die for an entire hour until I got it. It should not have taken this long. Sure, you need some decent luck to get the fiend to use a physical attack, and then to get the horse to activate on the same turn. But an hour is way too long for what the odds should have been. I don't think that the energetic trait can survive the fiend's attack either, or I was just having extremely bad luck. Anyways, after that agony, I got to the Dark Lord. I was super strong at this point, and could deal with anything that he threw at me. The damage was manageable thanks to Cure.exe. Nightmare would either be negated by himself, my safety mask, or by Lawnmower, and my attacks were super strong. After a bit, I was still at about full health, and he was on his last legs, before I used Mounted Attack, and finished him off. This, of course, is not the end though, as the curse took over Sophie, and now we needed to defeat the Darker Lord. Thanks to Dominic, our dragon friend, I knew that I didn't need to worry about the fact I couldn't leave the castle, through the normal way at least, and we headed to the Traveler's Hub. Things were smooth sailing here, and I just needed to help out a few people before we got to the end. Speaking of helping out, it'd be awesome if anyone who isn't subscribed and that has liked the video so far could do that. And I'm still planning on making many more videos like this for Miitopia and other great games. Anyways, I took out a few bosses that were fairly simple to beat, and I also got shield sprinkles, which were neat to have. And they would also certainly help with insta-kill attacks, not that we would deal with those again anytime soon. After that, I had to fight the most terrifying boss of all at this stage of the game, Toby. You see, what makes Toby, or the Woof of the Wisp, a problem is that he heals. That is it. He heals a ton though, and I have to get lucky enough to attack, so if Lawnmower takes too long, then that means that the boss just heals the damage that I dealt. Not only that, but the boss deals more damage than I heal. So, I was at a big disadvantage. The best way to deal with this was to hit it as hard as I could. I used Horse Whispering as often as possible, downing sprinkles, and getting some well-timed cheek rubs. After a few blasts, and some mounted attacks when my MP got very low, I had finished the boss. With that, I could finally move on up to the Darker Lord's skyscraper. The enemies were finally able to do some serious damage to me, and I had to be a bit more careful with them. I actually had some trouble with the crystal enemies, just because they did so much damage. They didn't hold me up for long though, don't worry. Beating the Phantom of Evil was just about as easy as the Dark Lord, so things were looking pretty good. Stan tagged along, and wasn't too big of a disturbance to the challenge, as he dealt just about no damage, and also healed a bit of extra HP for me, which was nice to have. Again, I beat some more bosses, and one was able to slow me down, being Pharaoh II. This proved to be every bit of a problem as the first one did, but I could manage thanks to having significantly higher stats, and Stan's healing from the sidelines. It was honestly just a waiting game, of which I won. So yeah, down with the boss. The next boss was just a tiny bit of trouble, being the frog and the tadpoles. They actually did quite a fair bit of damage, and even the tadpoles had a lot of health. Their damage was so considerable that I think I could have lost a few times if it wasn't for Stan's bonus healing. The solution, though, was just about what you would expect, where I had to blast them full of lasers. It only took 2 blasts to get rid of the big frog, but the tadpoles were actually still living. I just had to use Snort at this point, and like that, we were finished with the last boss of the tower. After completing one fairly challenging stage, I had to say goodbye to Stan and move on up. Next, in Otherworld, things were pretty easy, except for the aliens. They have a skill that turns me old, which, you know, sucks. I can still use my skills and stuff, so it isn't too terrible, but my damage with the horse was far weaker when I was old, so the battles with them took forever. At least it didn't take too long, and Otherworld is a fairly short place. Now, finally, we were at the Darker Lord's doorstep and ready to fight. The battles were changed so that it was just me and Lawnmower in 3 consecutive fights. First up, we had to fight the left hand. I was shocked to find out that it could hardly hurt me, at all even. Each attack did 1 damage, so I resigned myself to a fairly solid strategy. I decided not to use Horse Whispering for the first 2 fights, and instead, save all of my MP for the main body. It only took a few good hits to take down the left hand, and we immediately moved on to the right. The right hand was actually able to do some harm, but not enough to counteract my healing. Even its targeted attack could only do 20 damage, so I breezed past this fight too. The next boss, though, was a bit more difficult than that. Of course, since I had no teammates, no coin enemies would pop up during the fight, but the rest of the Dark Lord's moves were still plenty dangerous. Thankfully, Safety Mask and Lawnmower helped with Nightmare a ton, so I didn't have to deal with that status effect. After enduring some hits, Lawnmower finally jumped in, and I started to burn all of that MP, which I was saving up. Dealing over 600 damage each blast, I was ready to take this boss down. Lawnmower was being a real good sport too, giving me some MP and another chance to attack. On the 3rd hit, I used Mounted Attack and sent the boss into its 2nd phase. It used its attack that set me to 1 HP, but luckily, I know exactly how this goes. I used a Shield Sprinkle and healed up a bit with my HP sprinkles to make sure that I didn't die. Before having the chance to use Cure.exe, Lawnmower gave me another attack, and I didn't want to pass up the opportunity. The Dark Lord was about on his last legs, and I was having a bit of trouble trying to maintain my health. After another attack set me back down to 1 HP, Lawnmower stepped up. I got the Horse Whispering ready, and finally, I finished off the Darkest Lord. After we rescued Great Sage Sophie, I decided to spare the spirit, and that was that. We saved all of Miitopia with only our horse. Honestly, this was easier than the start of the game was, surprisingly. But that was not the final boss, because there's still new Lumos to deal with in the post-game. That will have to wait, however. This challenge still took many, many hours, and I've still got other videos that I want to make in the meantime. But don't worry, because I will do it soon enough. But with all of that said and done, thank you to everybody for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye!